The drone exploded mid-air, and every tactical sensor in the academy went dark, not from the impact, but because they couldn't process what just happened. Commander Zilax's voice crackled through the emergency channel. All stations, defensive grid failure. I repeat, defensive grid failure. Unknown weapon signature detected in Training Hall 7. In the massive hangar-sized classroom, 200 of the galaxy's finest military cadets stood frozen, their weapons still humming with power. Plasma rifles, energy cannons, particle accelerators, each one a masterpiece of engineering, coded and registered in the Academy's database, their electronic signatures as unique as fingerprints. And there, in the center of it all, stood Sarah Jackson, holding a curved piece of wood with string attached. Instructor Kael'thas stared at the scattered remains of his combat drone, 3 million credits worth of military-grade technology, now smoking pieces on the floor. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of severe cognitive dissonance among his species. "What?" he said slowly, his translator struggling with his tone. "Did you just do?" Sarah lowered the bow, looking genuinely confused. "I shot your drone?" According to YouTube analytics, 99.6% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. You said build a weapon for the final exam. Yes, but Kael'thas gestured at the other students' creations. A weapon, a proper weapon. This is a weapon. Sarah held up the bow. Bow and arrow. Been around for like 10,000 years back home. The Academy's security system was screaming. Alarms blared as automated defenses tried to classify the threat. Kinetic projectile, unregistered. No power signature, no electronic components, no database match. Does not compute. Vexia, the top student in the class, stepped forward, her silver skin flushed dark with indignation. I spent 6 weeks designing my plasma rifle, 6 weeks of calculations, prototyping, energy matrix alignments. You're telling me you made that and it works? I mean, yeah. Sarah picked up another arrow from her quiver, also handmade, also completely invisible to every sensor in the room. Took me about 3 days. Would have been faster, but I had to find the right wood in the biodome. Kael'thas was reviewing the security footage on his wrist display, rewinding and watching again. The arrow had left Sarah's bow at 0.003 seconds into the test sequence. His drone, equipped with state-of-the-art evasion protocols, had been moving at combat speed through a randomized pattern. The arrow had adjusted mid-flight. "That's impossible," he muttered. "Projectile course correction requires guidance systems, propulsion adjustments, computational—" "It's called reading the wind and leading your target," Sarah interrupted. "You just aim where it's going to be?" The silence in the room was profound. "You calculated a 3-dimensional intercept trajectory," Kael'thas said slowly. "In your head, in real time, while accounting for gravitational variance and atmospherics. Resistance?" Sarah shrugged. "I mean, I used to teach archery at summer camp. It's not that complicated once you get the feel for it." Commander Zilax materialized in the doorway, his military dress uniform perfect despite the emergency sprint. He was breathing hard, all 3 of his respiratory systems working overtime. "Someone explain why my defensive grid thinks we're under attack by an unknown species using unclassifiable weapons technology." Every student pointed at Sarah. She raised her hand awkwardly, still holding the bow. "That might be my fault, sir. Sorry about the drone." Commander Zilax approached the debris field that had been Instructor Kael'thas's pride and joy. He picked up a piece of the arrow, just wood and stone, bound with some kind of organic fiber. "This passed through our scanner barriers," he said quietly. "Every student who entered this room was screened for weapons. How did this get through?" "Well," Sarah said, "there's nothing to scan. It's just wood and rock and string. No electronics, no power source, no metal. Well, okay, some people use metal arrowheads, but I went traditional with the napped flint because—" "Stop," Zilax held up a hand. You're telling me our multi-billion credit security system, designed to detect every known weapon type in the galactic database, missed this because it's too simple? I guess. Vexia was circling Sarah like a predator studying prey. Explain the physics. My plasma rifle uses AI-assisted targeting. It tracks heat signatures, motion patterns, and predicts enemy movement 17 steps ahead. How did your stick outperform that? Sarah scratched her head. Okay, so you see how the arrow has feathers on the back? That's called fletching. It makes the arrow spin, which stabilizes the flight, and the string tension combined with the bow's flex, this is called draw weight, converts potential energy into kinetic energy. Then you just aim a bit high and to the side depending on distance and wind, and you're describing mechanical advantage principles from the first epoch of civilization, Kael'thas interrupted, his voice strange. These concepts predate spaceflight by millennia. Yeah, bows are pretty old school. The instructor pulled up a holographic display. According to my analysis, your projectile velocity exceeded the evasion protocols of a Mark 7 combat drone. That drone can dodge plasma fire from multiple angles simultaneously. How? It's watching for energy signatures, right? Sarah asked. Like, it detects when weapons are powering up or locking on? Yes, of course. Standard combat doctrine. Well, a bow doesn't power up. There's no lock-on sequence. You just shoot. She mimed drawing the bow. By the time your drone's sensors detected the arrow, it was already hit. Commander Zilax was accessing his command tablet, scrolling through data with increasing agitation. Instructor, pull up the weapons database. Search for, how do we even categorize this? Manual projectile weapon, Kael'thas offered. Non-powered, string-launched. The database returned 0 results. Search broader. Any handheld projectile weapons without electronic components. Still nothing. That can't be right, Vexia said. Search the historical archives. Pre-spaceflight civilizations. The database finally returned results. Thousands of them. Bows, crossbows, atlatls, slings, blowguns, entire categories of weapons that hadn't been used in galactic warfare for 50,000 years. Oh gods, Kael'thas whispered. We deleted them from active databases. They were considered obsolete. Sarah perked up. Oh, you guys have crossbows in there? Those are cool. Much easier to aim than bows, honestly. And slings. Man, you can do some damage with a sling. David versus Goliath, you know? I don't know what that means, Zilax said. Ancient human story. Little guy with a sling beats a giant warrior. The sling was basically a primitive weapon even back then, but it worked because the giant was expecting a sword, the commander finished, his voice hollow. He was prepared for conventional warfare. Exactly, Zilax turned to Kael'thas. Emergency faculty meeting, now. And someone explained to me why our entire defensive infrastructure is designed for technology we can see coming. The training hall had become an impromptu war room. Senior instructors clustered around holographic displays, while Sarah sat on a bench, casually making another arrow from materials she'd gathered from the Academy's workshop. This is absurd, declared Instructor Relia, head of defensive systems. One primitive weapon does not invalidate millennia of tactical development. Watch this, Commander Zilax replayed the footage again. The arrow, barely visible even in slow motion, threaded through the drone's defensive perimeter like it didn't exist. Our shields, our sensors, our countermeasures, all calibrated for energy weapons. What happens when the enemy doesn't use energy? Silence. Sarah looked up from her arrow crafting. Can I ask a question? What do your shields actually stop? Plasma, Rylia said, laser fire, particle beams, kinetic energy weapons that use propulsion systems. But what if someone just threw a rock really hard? The instructors looked at each other. Our shields would stop it, Rylia said, but she didn't sound certain anymore. Want to test that? Sarah stood up, holding her newly finished arrow. I mean, not with an arrow. I don't want to break more stuff, but I could toss something? 5 minutes later, Sarah stood outside a military-grade personal shield generator. She held a wrench from the workshop. "Anytime you're ready," Kael'thas said. Sarah threw the wrench. It sailed through the shield like it wasn't there and clanged off the wall behind it. "Impossible," Rilia breathed. "The shield is active. I can see the energy field." "The shield is calibrated for high-velocity threats. With electronic signatures," Zilax said quietly. "It's designed to stop bullets fired from railguns, not manually thrown objects." Sarah retrieved the wrench. "So what you're saying is, your super-advanced shields don't stop rocks. They stop military-grade projectiles." "Right, but if I walked up to someone with this shield and just poked them with a stick, would that work?" The look of existential horror on Rylia's face was answer enough. Vexia had been silent through all of this, her advanced mind processing the implications. "Instructor Kael'thas, request permission to speak." "Granted. Our entire tactical doctrine assumes technological parity or superiority. Every combat scenario we've trained for involves detecting enemy weapons, jamming their systems, overwhelming their defenses with superior firepower. But if an enemy doesn't use systems we can jam, then we can't detect them, can't jam them, and can't defend against them," Zilax finished. "Go on." "The human's weapon works in any environment. No power cells to run dry. No electronics to fail in an EMP blast. No heat signature to track. It's silent, sustainable, and can be manufactured from basic materials found on most planets." Sarah raised her hand. "Also, you can poison the arrows, or light them on fire, or use different arrowhead designs for armor penetration versus soft targets. It's pretty versatile." Every alien in the room was taking notes now. Kael'thas pulled up a star map. "Scenario: we're in deep space combat. All electronic systems are damaged by enemy fire. We have no power. How do we fight back?" The instructors had no answer. "I can still shoot," Sarah said quietly. "Bao doesn't need power. As long as I have arrows and the strength to draw the string, I'm armed." "Scenario 2, Zilax said, his tactical mind racing. "Complete sensor blackout. We can't detect the enemy electronically. How do we engage?" "Stealth isn't very useful when your weapon glows and makes noise," Sarah offered. "Bows are silent. You can shoot from concealment without giving away your position." Rilia was shaking her head. "This is insane. You're suggesting we regress to primitive warfare?" "I'm suggesting," Zilax said coldly, "that we've become so dependent on technology that we've forgotten the basics. What happens when that technology fails? Or when we face an enemy smart enough not to use technology we can counter?" "Combat simulation," Commander Zilax announced. "Cadet Jackson versus our automated defense grid, standard infiltration scenario." Sarah looked nervous for the first time. I'm not really a combat person. I taught archery to kids at summer camp." "You just defeated military-grade equipment with Stone Age technology. Humor me." The simulation room was the Academy's pride, a massive space filled with obstacles, moving platforms, and enough firepower to level a small city. Automated turrets tracked heat, motion, and energy signatures. Drones patrolled. With overlapping sensor coverage, it was designed to be nearly impossible. Sarah stepped inside, bow in hand, quiver on her back. "Begin simulation." The defense grid activated. Sensors swept the room. Turrets hummed to life. Drones launched. Sarah crouched low and moved into the shadows. The control room watched in fascination as the tracking systems tried to lock on. Heat signature, minimal. Motion detection, inconsistent. Energy readings, none. "She's using manual stealth techniques," Kael'thas murmured. "Moving during sensor sweep intervals, staying in the dark, minimizing her profile. These are tactics from before we had detection technology." Sarah reached a vantage point and notched an arrow. Drew, released. A drone fell from the sky, arrow through its central processor. The defense grid registered a projectile impact but couldn't identify the source. Turrets swiveled, searching for an energy signature that didn't exist. Sarah had already moved. Another arrow, another drone down. Her weapon produces no muzzle flash, no heat bloom, no sound signature above ambient, Raylia said, reading the displays. The system knows something is attacking, but it can't locate the threat origin. 3 more arrows in quick succession. 3 turrets went dark, arrows lodged in their sensor arrays. She's targeting the sensors first, Vexia observed, blinding the system before it can adapt. Sarah rolled behind cover as the remaining turrets fired blindly at her last known position. She waited until the barrage stopped, then emerged from a different angle entirely. The final drone never saw her coming. Simulation complete, Zilax said. Time, 4 minutes, 37 seconds. That's faster than our top combat graduates. Sarah emerged from the simulation room, slightly out of breath. Okay, that was actually kind of fun, but your defense grid has a major vulnerability. It's built for technology warfare. No offense. None taken, Kael'thas said quietly. In fact, you've just exposed a critical flaw in our entire military infrastructure. If a basic human with traditional weapons can defeat our systems this easily, what happens when we face an enemy who understands this weakness? Commander Zilax pulled up his command interface. I'm filing an emergency protocol revision. Every defensive system in the Academy needs recalibration to include low-tech threat detection. And, he looked at Sarah, we need you to teach a class. I'm sorry, what? Pre-technology combat scenarios. You're now a guest lecturer. I teach kids how to shoot at targets. I'm not a military instructor. You just infiltrated a military-grade defense system using weapons that predate spaceflight, Vexia said. I want to learn everything you know. Sarah looked overwhelmed. I mean, I can teach you archery, but there's a whole learning curve. It takes years to get really good. Your plasma rifle is probably easier to use, honestly. My plasma rifle needs a charging station, Vexia countered. It's registered in multiple databases. It has a unique energy signature. And if I'm ever in a situation where technology fails, it becomes a fancy club. Your bow works anywhere, always, forever. Kael'thas was already pulling up curriculum files. We'll need to integrate primitive weapons defense into every combat course. Ballistic trajectory calculation, non-electronic projectile tracking, low-tech infiltration techniques. You know, Sarah interrupted, back on Earth, we teach most of this to 10-year-olds. The entire room fell silent. You train children in weapons engineering? Raylia asked, horrified. We call it summer camp, archery, knife throwing, wilderness survival. It's recreation. Your species considers combat training to be recreational? Sarah laughed. I mean, we also have dodgeball, which is basically practice for dodging projectiles while throwing your own, and capture the flag, which is strategic team-based combat simulation. Oh, and paintball, that's simulated warfare with non-lethal markers. You let children engage in simulated warfare, Zilax said slowly, for fun. Well, yeah, how else are they going to learn? 3 weeks later, the Galactic Military Academy had transformed. Half the training halls now featured primitive weapons ranges. Archery targets lined the walls. Instructors struggled with bowstrings while their students, including a very dedicated Vexia, practiced daily. Sarah had become an unlikely celebrity. Her Basic Ballistics for Advanced Species course was the most popular elective in Academy history. In the workshop, she sat with a group of students, demonstrating arrow construction. See, the important thing is straightness. If the arrow wobbles, your accuracy suffers. Back home, we'd use power tools for this, but you can do it with just a knife and patience. Vexia held up her third attempt. How's this? Better! The fletching is still a bit uneven, but that'll come with practice. Instructor Kael'thas entered carrying a data pad. Cadet Jackson, I've received your curriculum proposal for next semester. Did you seriously suggest a course on slingshots? I mean, once everyone masters bows, slings are the logical next step. Super portable, incredibly simple, and the ammunition is literally rocks. You can find ammo anywhere. The Galactic Defense Council is requesting a formal presentation on primitive weapons integration, Kael'thas continued. Apparently, 17 other military academies want to implement similar programs. All because I shot a drone, Sarah muttered. All because you reminded us that sophistication isn't the same as effectiveness, Kael'thas corrected. We became so advanced that we forgot the fundamentals. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. Relia appeared in the doorway, looking exhausted. The shield recalibration project is complete. Every defensive system in the Academy can now detect and respond to low-velocity kinetic threats. The processing power required is absurd. We're basically teaching computers to see rocks, but it works. Good, Commander Zelak said, joining them, because I just received intelligence that the Vexthul Empire has started training their troops in primitive weapons. They saw our Academy reports and realized the same vulnerabilities exist in their systems. Sarah looked up. Wait, so I accidentally started an arms race with Stone Age technology? You've revolutionized galactic warfare, Vexia said proudly. My family back home wants me to teach them archery. They're talking about it on the news networks, how humans never forgot the old ways. We didn't forget, Sarah said. We just never stopped using them. Hunting, sport, recreation. Bows are still around because they're useful and fun. We didn't throw them away just because we invented guns. Kael'thas nodded slowly. That might be the most important lesson here. We treated technological advancement as replacement rather than addition. We deleted the old databases instead of preserving them. We assumed that new meant better in all circumstances. Okay, but guns are definitely better than bows in most situations, Sarah pointed out. I'm not saying go back to the Stone Age, I'm just saying don't forget where you came from. A junior instructor rushed in. Commander, there's a situation. Cadet Zoranix brought what he calls a catapult to the engineering lab and... Tell me he didn't launch anything, Zilak sighed. He launched a watermelon at the administration building. Sarah burst out laughing. Oh man, I mentioned siege weapons one time as a joke. This is your fault, Kael'thas said, but he was smiling. You've inspired chaos. I've inspired creativity, Sarah corrected. Your students are thinking outside the box. Or outside the power cell, I guess. Commander Zilax pulled up his communicator. I'll handle the catapult situation. Cadet Jackson, your next assignment is to prepare that Defense Council presentation. And please, he looked at her seriously, don't give them any ideas about catapults. No promises. As the commander left, Sarah returned to her arrows. Around her, alien students practiced drawing bowstrings, comparing arrow designs, and debating the physics of projectile motion without computers. Vexia sat down beside her. Can I ask you something? Sure. When you first made this bow, did you know it would change everything? Sarah laughed. I just wanted to pass the class. I'm good with bows, so I built what I knew. I didn't realize you guys had completely forgotten about non-electronic weapons. We didn't forget. We dismissed them as primitive and irrelevant. That's the thing about basics, Sarah said, running her hand along the bow's curve. They're called that because they're fundamental. You can build all the advanced stuff you want on top of them, but if you lose the foundation, everything else falls apart. She stood up, stretching. Anyway, I've got to get to lunch. Want to join me? Actually, Vexia said hesitantly, I was hoping you could teach me about those dodgeball tactics you mentioned. The concept of recreational combat training fascinates me. Sarah grinned. Oh, this is going to be fun. Fair warning, though, dodgeball gets intense. We had kids at camp who took it way too seriously. Your species trained warriors disguised as children's play activities. I mean, if you want to put it that way, sure. We also had swimming lessons, which is basically survival training for water environments, and hiking, which is endurance training and navigation skills. Summer camp is pretty hardcore when you think about it. They walked toward the cafeteria together, Sarah explaining the finer points of dodgeball strategy while Vexia took detailed notes. Behind them, in the workshop, Kael'thas picked up one of Sarah's practice bows. He tested the string tension, admired the craftsmanship, and thought about 50,000 years of military doctrine potentially undone by a human who thought she was just passing a class. He smiled. Sometimes the best weapon was the one nobody saw coming, and sometimes the most advanced civilization was the one that never forgot how to throw a rock.